Hey YouTube, welcome back to the BladesIIB shop and another project video. Today, got a little bit of work to do on my son's car. He's got an old Saab 9.3, and ever since we've had it, really haven't been able to use the convertible top very much. It's got a couple of the cylinders that leak, so if you put the top down, it just runs hydraulic fluid all over the floor, and then you've got to fill it back up again before you can put the top up. So a little bit hard to use. I think we've narrowed it down to the cylinder that leaks. So we pulled that cylinder off, and we've found a little bit of information on how to rebuild it. So we're going to go through and try to rebuild that hydraulic cylinder on there for the roof. And then also in putting the roof up and down, there's a manual latch where you can lock the front down right here onto the top. And in manually doing that, it's stripped out that piece, so it's no longer able to even be manually locked. So got a little bit of work to do to repair the roof on this. A small part we're going to make on the CNC mill, and then we're going to get into the cylinder and see if we can find the O-rings and all the parts that we need to get that rebuilt. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I encourage you to check out some of the other videos on here on machining, welding, knife making, just everything else going on here in the BladesIIB shop. If you like the channel, would love it if you hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, drop a like, drop a comment on here. Let others know it's worth checking out. For those of you already subscribed to the channel, hey, I sure appreciate you coming back and watching these videos. All right, let's go ahead, take a look at what we're doing here, and then get into it. Let's go. All right, so here's the part that we're working on today. So in order to be able to manually lock the front of this roof down on this Saab 9.3, they have a manual piece that give you a tool provided with the vehicle. It's just a hex head, and you can put it up in here to turn this and manually lock this in place. So you see those rods are hooked over there, and it just lets it come over and manually operate this. So right now I've already got it pulled off. You can see that this is clearly stripped out. There's no hex head that's going to go in there and operate that anymore. We're just going to go ahead and make this small part on the CNC. So first we're going to go draw this up in Fusion, and then we'll come down and cut this. All right, so we're also working on one of the cylinders that leaks out of here right now. And because we have the cylinder pulled off, that's the main reason we need to be able to manually open and close the roof until we get that repaired. So I didn't get any video of it, but it was a lot of work to get that cylinder out. There's a little hole on the inside of the car, and it goes through into there, and you've got to have an actual puller to be able to pull the pin out. It's in there pretty snug, so we built a little spacer tool and we're able to pull that out. We'll show that in a little more detail putting it back together. Didn't get any video of that coming out, but we will show rebuilding that cylinder as well. Found one video of it on YouTube, but it only shows rebuilding the bottom section, and I'm pretty sure we've got to get some O-rings on the top of that as well. So that's what we've got going on. Let's go first hit Fusion and go build and design this part and get that done. So we're back to at least manual operation, and then we'll get that cylinder rebuilt and get this thing fully put back together. Well, here is how the design came together in Fusion. Got in here and just drew a box first as their sketch for the outer perimeters or the outer dimensions on this. Dropped the holes on there, so really designing this around the 4 holes, the 2 posts, the hex, and then the screw hole that mounts it on there. Lined those up, got those holes on there, and then just built out the radiuses out from those points and just kind of used that to make concentric lines off the edge of those radiuses to sort of build that outer diameter. And then from there, just extruded to design our part. So this is what we ended up with here. Let's turn that sketch off. So modified this piece up here a little bit, just made it a little bit simpler. There's plenty of room on the part. So rather than from their casting, this kind of came around and had some little bumps out the side for some support. Just left that all on there. I think that'll be easier to machine. And we've got our posts on there. Basically this height and the top of these are the same. They're all sitting flat on that same plate where it screws in place. So I think that should give us a pretty good design of a part. Same as what we had in there before. After we got it designed, we went over to the manufacturer side and we've got 2 setups on there. On our first setup, we're going to go into the part and face off our block. Then we're going to go really machine out sort of all of that whole pocket in there. And then we're going to cut a little bit around the outer edge just because of how I'm grabbing it and the height. We're only going to drop in about 40 thou to cut and machine around the overall dimension of the part. And then we're going to rough out that hex pocket. Just put a little bevel on the top of the posts and around that other piece. Drill, mark our hole in there, finish drilling that hole, and then we're going to get in there with a 1/16 end mill and finish off the inside of that hex. You can see I did quite a few step overs. I want to just take light cuts with that 1/16 end mill.
It's got to hang out of the collet a full 3/4 of an inch to get all the depth it needs to get down there. So just taking some light cuts in the aluminum to get that done. On the second setup, we're just going to flip this over and got quite a bit to grab onto on the back side. We're going to face it off. If I were making a whole bunch of these, then I would make a fixture to be able to put these in to actually machine the contours around the back side. Since we're only making one of these and it's a prototype, then we're going to go and we're just going to hacksaw around this profile and get rid of that last little bit of aluminum, get rid of these chunks that are here, and then we're just going to hit that on the belt grinder on the outer edge to clean that up. Again, we're only making one. There's no sense in making a whole fixture that this can drop into and screw down to bolt on to be able to hit that contour. That outer dimension is not anything precise, so hitting that on the belt grinder, we can get that to look good. Shouldn't be a problem at all. So that is our basic design. We ran through and kind of hit the simulation on this. I'll show that here really quickly. Again, we're going to face off the top, get in there and clean out that whole pocket. All those different depths and dimensions, knock all those out. Did some rough cuts and then finish all those. Run around that outer contour, finish off the hex, and we should have a part. Whole thing, I think machining out that pocket area, that's the longest step. It takes about 9 minutes. So making this whole part, we should be looking at somewhere around machining time. So actually not even a whole 20 minutes. We're looking at about 14 minutes and 11 seconds. So with tool changeovers and all that, just a little over 15 minutes, and we should knock out this whole piece. Let's go see how we did. Let's head down to the Tormach, and let's go test our prototype programming here and see how we did. See you down at the machine. All right, so we got this all set up in there. Got all of our tools loaded. Should be about a 15-minute program. We'll go through and get this cut, see how it turns out.
cut that out pretty much as planned, I think. We'll get a mic or we'll get the calipers on there and we'll just measure the diameter on those posts. Make sure we've got good diameter on those before we pull that out of there. But that is looking like it's supposed to. Didn't seem to have any trouble cutting that hex. I slowed the feed down on that 1/16 cutter just to make sure it was in there nice. But man, everything seemed to cut just fine. Cycle time with all the tool changes right at 16 minutes 20 seconds. Seemed to go as planned. Let's do a little measuring and then we'll flip that over and face off the back side and cut our part out. All right, we're just gonna go set that up and face off the bottom side of this piece, get it down to our base thickness, then we'll countersink that hole in the back side and then we'll hacksaw out the shape, hit it on the belt grinder, and we should have a finished part. And there we've got it faced off to thickness. Now I'm just going to go throw it over in the other vise on the manual mill, line up on that hole just with a drill bit to get really close, and then we'll just manually put the countersink in the backside of that for the screw. And then we should be set to cut it out. All right, so not the most efficient way, but this is still faster than trying to program this and make a jig for just one of these. Cuts through there pretty fast. We got our profile done on the hex. Since we used that 1/16 cutter, there's just tiny radius in the corners, so we just need to nick those out with a file to get our hex key to fit in there. Okay, we're about halfway through. Just a little rub on this side. All right, there we go. We've got a nice snug fit. Before we go put this on the car, just our quick comparison here. So there's our two parts. Just modified it in here a little bit to make it a little easier to machine. But otherwise, we've got our steps on there. You know, just don't have our casting marks on the backside. But I would say we've got a good looking part. Let's go see how it fits. Well, here's the big moment of truth. Let's make sure it fits on there. Get our little green washers back on there. Here, you gotta put these back in. Well, there we go, shiny new part. All right, put the hex in there, give it a turn. Yes.
All right, that works. I can't turn it with my hands, but.
You know, that's why you gotta have a tool to put on there. But we are back in business, able to manually lock the car again.
Well, here we are back in business. We've got this thing operational. There we are. So going towards the windshield is locking it in place, and pulling it towards the middle of the car is unlocking it to make sure we've got this right. Okay, so go lock it back in place towards the windshield. That is a successful little part on there. Now we're moving on to the cylinders. All right, we'll check you back at the bench. All right, so here's this cylinder that we had to pull out of that car. So this is the one we need to rebuild. It's leaking out the bottom here. It's also leaking out the top side. So this is the pin that goes all the way through. That pin was through this bottom hole right here, and it's a pretty snug, like a little press fit. So this is the spacer that we used on the inside of the car, and we just kept stacking up nuts and spacers to be able to pull that out. The inside of this pin is threaded for this 5mm bolt, so we're able to thread that bolt in there and just, again, use a spacer from inside the back seat of the car to slowly pull this pin all the way out. Going back in should be a little easier. We should be able to just pound the pin all the way back in. If you had like a slide hammer, that would be another easy way to slide that bolt, or to thread the bolt in there and then hook onto the end of that bolt and use a slide hammer to pull it out. That would work. So from what we found online, that pin is really what holds the bottom section into this hydraulic cylinder. So there's an O-ring we need to fix on this to help part of our leaking. But I know that this rod moving up and down, there's also leaking on that. So I know there's got to be another O-ring somewhere on this rod. The ends are crimped, so we're basically just going to go around with a Dremel and cut the bottom of this one open and also grind off where those dimples are. All of that is what's locking that pin inside the cylinder. I'm hoping that I can unthread the top of this off of here and then push that other rod all the way out to be able to change the O-rings on that, because I don't want to undo the top of this. If I undo the top of that, then I don't know of any way that we're going to hold that back together. So they don't make these very easy to rebuild. We were able to buy a little kit, so the little O-rings that are inside these holes, we do have the O-rings to replace for inside of there. But first off, Dremel off the bottom of this, and I'm going to go see if we can unscrew the head off of this one to be able to push that rod through. So that's the plan on the cylinder. Okay, so we got this going in here. We're just going to clamp this in a vise. And yes, this is threaded. Awesome. Okay, so we should be able to pull this thing completely apart now when we get in there. Yep, nice soft jaws. We didn't do any damage to our rod. So now we should be able to replace any O-rings, everything that we've got inside here. So let's go ahead and, I think I might even stick this in the lathe and try to machine that off rather than a Dremel and get a nice clean removal of that pin at the end, and then we'll get that pushed out. Let's get this set up in the lathe. All right, so I was not able to get that into the 3-jaw. It just wouldn't clamp down enough to get around this notch on here. So we've got it set up in the 4-jaw, and I've got some dimples on there, so a little bit tough to dial in, but I would say we've got it within about a thou and a half of run out on there around those dimples. So that's gonna be a whole lot closer than we were gonna get with a Dremel tool. So we're gonna go in there and machine off this crimped portion off the end and get rid of that. And then we're also gonna, we're just gonna go back a little bit farther to get rid of those dimpled portion on there. And then we're just gonna let this pin hold it all back together when we're done, and we're not gonna be re-crimping the bottom section right here. So I think I'm just gonna machine the bottom, and then I think I will just get in there with the Dremel to clean up around those dimpled marks. So we'll just machine off this bottom 1/8 of an inch or so and grind around the dimple marks to get that clear. All right, I think there's still some hydraulic oil in here, so I'm gonna machine this. I'm gonna turn it really, really slow. Just got a cutter. I'm just gonna push in on this aluminum and just pop that ring off the end. But again, the reason I'm turning it so slow is I'm still probably gonna fling some oil out of here a little bit from what's left over in that cylinder. And that worked out well. All that pressure on the side let us know exactly when that released and popped off. So we've got our bottom ring off of there. Like I say, we'll just get in there with our Dremel a little bit and we'll just grind out a little bit where those dimple marks are. Or we'll check, we'll see if that is actually gonna move out of there first. From what I saw online though, he had to grind out from those dimple marks. So we'll double check that, see what we need to do. But let's get back over to the vise, check it out. All right, that other one was just totally plugging up with aluminum, didn't make it in there very far. I'm gonna try like this drywall bit. I'll see if this will grab enough in aluminum. Otherwise, I've got a carbide burr that I'll use, but I just hate the slivers that it throws off. So we'll try this first and see if we can get through this aluminum here. Let's get this turned around, hit the other side. Okay, as soon as that got through there, I was able to see that turning already. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and go through it the rest of the way. Definitely the pin is turning underneath though, so we are cleared. Okay, well, it spins in there super easy. I think I didn't machine back quite far enough. Okay, I can see where there's actually a different size on there. So I needed to go back just a little bit farther with my machining. So back to the lathe real quick and let's... All right, so we just machined a hair back further on the lathe and that worked. So there's a definite step on here and that's what we were having to try to machine that aluminum back enough to clear. I'm not convinced we had to grind down into those dimple marks or not, but we already did that now. So there's our one O-ring that we need to replace. And I'm gonna get in there and deburr the inside of this a little bit, make sure that we're not gonna nick any other O-rings on the way in or out. Okay, all right, so we got those deburred a little bit on the ends. There's also a definite step in there in front of this O-ring where it goes up to and locks in place. So this is actually loose in here on the end and it's up against that next step where it catches. So, and let's see what we've got with this other rod coming out here. Yes, there we go. There's our other O-ring that we're gonna wanna change on there. So we should be able to replace these two O-rings and rebuild this cylinder. This one's actually this one's an O-ring on the end. Yep, definitely that was a problem. That just split and completely fell apart on me there. This one looks like we can unscrew it off the end and maybe it's a little bit thicker. Maybe it's a full wiper. We'll have to see if we can replace that one or not. Just wanted to add in some quick video now that we got this completely apart the rest of the way. On the end of the rod, we pulled this off. Don't actually have to. I don't think it made any difference for us in taking that off or not. The piece that goes on there, it's a little bit different than what's on the aluminum piece in the end. It's actually two parts. So it's two-part pieces for all the other seals in here. So you've got an O-ring that goes on there, and then on the outside of that O-ring is this, I guess it's like a wiper. It's a little bit more of a hard plastic seal. That's what's gonna go on the outside of that piston that was on the end of the rod. And then in the top end of that cylinder, you can just see that down in there, there's two O-ring grooves. One a little bit near the top, another one about maybe almost an inch or so down in there. And in those two grooves, again, you have an O-ring, and then you've got that same hard seal going on there. And from what it looks like, those seals look like they're one direction, so that when the oil hits them one way, they swell up. They've got a bit of a tapered edge on them. So I'm not sure if I should have taken these out of there or not. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to find new parts to put those back in. So maybe we should have left these alone. We're gonna go hit the hydraulic store and see if we can find the parts that we need. So O-rings, I don't think we'll have any trouble finding O-rings that size. I'm a little bit concerned about finding these seals and being able to get those in the exact size that we want. We'll find out when we go hit the store, but that's what it looks like all apart. And then of course the original piece, you know, clearly that's the most dried up, and that is the part that seems to be leaking the most. The rest of these, maybe we should have left them alone, but we'll find out. Stay tuned and we'll see if we're able to get this all back together and functioning again. Well, good news. We were able to find all the parts that we needed for the rod seals up here at the top of the cylinder, for the piston seal, and then we found the new O-ring for the pin to go up through in the bottom. And also from Saab, you can actually still order, or from just some Saab distributors, you can buy the little O-rings that go in the ends here where the hoses go in. So those O-rings we did purchase online from a Saab dealer. These other parts just had to go to a local hydraulic shop, and they were able to look them up and find those. So here's the part numbers. So for this O-ring here at the end, from our best measurement, we came up with, that's a 1.8 by 13.3 millimeter O-ring. So we got a few of those. For this piston seal here, came up with a MPS-16 by 2 by 1 for that piston seal. And I'll drop a picture in for the piston seal. It doesn't matter which direction this goes because that piston goes up and down both ways. So I'll show you a close-up picture of that, and this outer ring on here is actually the same both ways. So that one we can put on whichever direction. And then finally for these rod seals, there's two of those up here in the top of the cylinder. Those are part number MKR-8 by 13 by 2. And these ones are unidirectional or one directional. So again, I'll get a close-up for you, but there's a little step inside that inner seal, and you want to make sure that that step is going towards the pressure. So we want to make sure that step is going down on both of these. So right now the plan is we're going to go just back over to the vise really quick, and we'll put a little bit of blue Loctite on here, and we're going to put our piston back onto the rod. We'll get that tightened on there. We didn't actually need to take that off, so if you're doing this from start, you don't even have to take this piston off. We're going to get this in the vise, get that tightened back on there, and then we'll come back over here and we'll work on getting all these seals back in. I think everything at this end is going to be pretty easy. Getting these rod seals back down in there probably going to be a bit of a challenge. And we're going to use some plastic dental tools for all of our installation. I used some metal dental tools to pull all those seals out of there, but we'll use plastic to put everything back in to make sure we're not damaging any of our new seals. Once we get those back in, ideally it would be nice if we put the rod in from the top, but we don't have a choice because we have to get the piston on. We're going to put the rod up from the bottom. Once we get that rod up, then we'll grab it again and we'll bolt our eye back on, and then we'll stick our end cap back in there and get that together. We'll use a little bit of the hydraulic oil that we have from the vehicle, and we'll make sure we're lubricating all these O-rings and all these parts as we're going through and getting that assembly done. So, all right, we're just going to go over to the vise real quick, lock this on here, and then we'll come back and get to assembling and getting all these seals in there. All right, so getting our O-ring on the end here, pretty straightforward. Just push that around. So that one's easy. Now we'll get our piston seal on. So again, this one doesn't matter which way it goes. It's a pretty good stretch to get that around there. And then we've got to get our stiff nylon piece over there. If I can do that with trying not to roll it around. There we go. Okay, so I've got that around. That push back into shape a little bit. All right, so for these little O-rings, pull one out at a time, and we'll see how much trouble we have getting one in, and make sure we're going to be able to do that to do the other one. Yeah, I don't even think it's not even actually going into an O-ring groove in there. It's just going right into the tube. So now for our challenging ones. gonna try to get our C shape here with the O-ring. Not exactly as planned, but I got it past the first hole and it just went right past and through. All right, so I was able to push it down in there. I got it sort of locked in one side, and then I came up from the bottom and I was able to push and get it to pop in the other side. So we've got one of the O-rings in there. Let me go ahead and get the other O-ring in place, and then we'll work on getting the seals. All right, the top one, no problem at all. Now I think, all right, I need that to be down like that. I think I'm gonna do the same thing. I think I'm gonna try to go straight in this way, and then I'm gonna try to turn it once it's down in the tube and get it to pop into its groove. So I'm gonna hold a little bit from the top and push from the bottom to get that to turn in place there. Okay, pretty tricky getting these little bottom ones in. I'll keep fighting with it here and let you know when we get it. All right, so I'm actually gonna try to just push this one direction instead of fighting it from both ends. So I took the pin that came out of the bottom and I put that pin, it's pretty much the right size, same size as the rod or similar. I'm gonna set that in there so that it's against the bottom of that O-ring groove, and then I'm just gonna go down from the top, and that way, that's gonna stop it from going down any further into the tube, and then I should just have to push from the top to turn it to get it to pop into place there. Was so close. That almost did it. It didn't want to quite pop into place, but that was definitely the best technique so far. So let's try that again. Okay, we got it in there. Once I got it down there, kind of pushed it into that C shape, it popped back out. Should be a lot easier to get this top one in and get it to hold its shape a little better. Okay, so we kind of get it into that C shape, get it started down in there. There we go. So we got it into that nice C shape in there. We've got it in our groove, started, and then we'll use these plastic tools to pull that back around. It's got a little kink to it. It's almost kind of pulled behind the O-ring there. Got to massage that back into shape. Ah, there we go. We've got to push back down. Okay, and then just using the tapered edge of this tool, this plastic tool, we got that massaged back into shape there. We've got those back where they need to be. All right, we'll get a little close up. So that is, we've got that step part. You can see that's pointing down. We got the other one further down in there. So again, massage those back into shape. Looking pretty round in there. We'll see how they seal. And now we'll get our piston pushed back up, get the rod pushed back up through there, get this thing put together. Okay, you can actually see the piston seal a little bit through these holes on the side, so able to make sure that that's staying nice and straight and in place. And just a little tap with our plastic rod and we are in there. Okay, we have assembly. And our last O-ring sealing up. We should be able to push this pin back in there to get this thing back together now to get lined up. It's still, maybe it's going to be a press fit into the vehicle. We'll see where all that goes, but at least for here we know we'll be able to get good alignment, get that on. So now, that feels really good. We just need to go over, get our eye bolted back on there, get a little bit of acetone, make sure we have oil off of this. We'll put a little bit of Loctite on that eye. We'll get that tightened back on in the vise, and we're ready to go put this back in the vehicle. Well, there it is, 100% back together. We got the eye back on, so our end piece there doesn't look too terribly bad. Get our pin to fit through there. We've got a good feeling cylinder. We'll go get this mounted back on the car, see if we have solved our leak problem. All right, let's head back to the car. All right, we're going to manually get the roof back down so we can get in there to where we need to work on this. All right, so here's where it's got to go back in. So there's a sensor that needs to go back on that cylinder. We've got our two lines. So those are the other two little O-rings that we put in there are going to be for these two lines to go in. A little clip slide to lock those. And then it's got one mount up on top, and then we'll line it up on the bottom, and we'll put that other pin in down in through there. All right, so these little O-rings, we're going to put those on the hoses instead of in the holes. Okay, sensor's on there. Let's go see what we can do about this pin. Overall assembly went pretty good. We didn't have great camera angle inside the hole, so it's pretty much just a whole bunch of us blocking the view and not getting in there. But once we got the O-rings on the lines instead of in the holes, that helped a lot. Still, getting those lines lined up, that was probably our biggest challenge in getting the little clips to slide on. Actually getting in there and lining it up and pounding the pin back in, that went pretty smooth. But it was a lot of little fiddling around, tight space. Eventually, we got it all back together. Well, here we're going to test this roof, see what happens. Okay, let's see how she goes. Okay, you may have to, it's probably got to pump oil a little bit, so you probably just got to go back and forth a couple times. And I may have to refill it, we'll see. It's pretty empty, a lot leaked out of all those lines. So, all right, cycle it a couple more times, see what happens. Pump some pressure. Yeah. All right, the back moved. Okay, you may have to go back the other way or something. And let it move some oil. Okay, then. I'll go let that come down. Let that cylinder move and come down. That's what's going to flush the air out of it. Okay. All right, let me check the fluid level. Can you open the trunk? Yeah, let me fill it. It's very low. Okay. Okay. Hey! Give a big thumbs up for the camera. Success. Cycle it a couple times. Alright. Okay, one more, just give me 1 second. All right, there's our replaced cylinder in there. And okay, there's the one we just replaced in there. Looking good. We are functioning. There's a couple of cycles open and closed. We've got a functioning convertible top again. What do you think, Jake?
Pretty sweet.
All right. Okay, go ahead and put it back where you want it to be.
down here is where it was all leaking out and it would pool up on the floor. We don't have anything coming out there right now after several ups and downs. So that's a good sign.
Hey, well, YouTube, well, that's a wrap on another video here in the BladesIIB shop as we did some work on the convertible top on the Saab 9.3. We were able to get the front piece made so that we can manually lock it while it was out of commission while we were repairing the cylinders. And then now we were able to completely rebuild the cylinder that was causing us problems and leaking. And we've got full functionality for the roof. So it's been about 3 or 4 days since we finished and the vehicle's been out, driven around. He's had the top up and down a few times and we've got no noticeable loss of oil in the reservoir, and it hasn't failed to go up and down. The issue we were having before is once it's leaking a little bit, it loses pressure and you get the little error where it says that it's got an obstruction, it's not able to completely open or finish closing. So haven't had any of the error codes, haven't had any obstructions. So for right now, I think we've got it functioning pretty well, and hey, it was a pretty fun project, making a little CNC part to get that manual lock back in place, and then really figuring out how to get these cylinders apart and all back together. A little bit tricky dealing with some of the seals on these small hydraulic cylinders, and definitely it's pretty snug operating back in there and getting the lines on. I know I didn't really get some really good video of that for you, but if you're mechanically inclined, you'll be able to see in there to do that. The biggest challenge is pulling that pin out, and I kind of described what sort of a puller we used for that, and then putting the pin back in. That's just as simple as pounding it back in place. It's not that tight of a press fit, just tight enough that you've got to have something to be able to pull it out of there. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I know my son is super happy that his car is back in operation, that he's got a top that goes up and down, so glad we were able to get that taken care of for him. And hopefully if you've got a similar vehicle, you're able to get some learning out of this to be able to take care of that for your own parts. Hey, if you're new to the channel, sure appreciate you being here and checking this out. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out some of the other videos on the channel around machining, welding, knife making, car repair, just everything else going on here in the BladesIIB shop. And for those of you already subscribed, I sure appreciate you coming here to watch these. All right, until next time, I hope you're out in your own shop making some chips of your own, working on some vehicles of your own, whatever the case may be. I'll be here working on that next video. I know we've got some motor mounts that we need to put in this Saab 9.3 as well, so that's going to be the next video, is going through putting the motor mounts and the strut mounts in here. So stay tuned for one more video on repair on this Saab 9.3, and then we'll get back in the shop and we'll see what's waiting for us there for other future videos. Until then, y'all take care.